What you are about to hear is not just a football story. It is a war between two franchises, two cities, and two quarterbacks who were born to destroy each other. One man woke up in a cold sweat the night before, haunted by a nightmare that he would fail. The other was already running out of time to save his season. And when those two worlds collided inside that stadium on a freezing January afternoon, what happened next shook the entire NFL to its core. Nobody, and I mean nobody, was ready for what unfolded in that building. Before we get into all of it, if you're new here and you love deep dive NFL stories told the way they deserve to be told, hit that subscribe button right now. We break down the drama, the history, and the chaos that the highlight reels never show you. Now, let's get into it. The Cincinnati Bengals and the Cleveland Browns. Two franchises separated by barely 250 miles of Ohio highway and a century's worth of mutual hatred. This rivalry is not glamorous. It is not played in prime time every week. It does not always get the national spotlight. But inside the AFC North, everyone who truly understands professional football knows that when these two teams meet, something always happens. Something raw, something personal, something that nobody can fully predict. To understand why the 2025 season felt different, why the pressure between these two franchises reached a boiling point unlike anything in recent memory, you have to understand where both teams were coming from. You have to understand the scars. Let's start in Cincinnati. Joe Burrow had to deal with a brutal 2025 season in which the Bengals finished 6-11 and endured a Joe Burrow injury that sidelined their star quarterback for 10 weeks, while a defense that ranked 31st in the NFL made every game a nightmare. The man who took this franchise to the Super Bowl a few years earlier, the same man who had transformed Cincinnati from an afterthought into a legitimate contender, was watching from the sidelines while his team bled out week after week. Burrow was not just hurt physically. Every loss, every blown fourth-quarter lead, every defensive collapse, all of it cost this franchise, and everyone in Cincinnati felt it. But Burrow is not the kind of man who stays down. Cincinnati went 3-2 since Burrow returned from injury in Week 13, and 5-2 overall with QB1 as the starter. That's the thing about Joe Burrow that his critics never seem to fully grasp. The man is different. The calm, the precision, the refusal to acknowledge pressure. It is not an act. When Burrow came back from that injury, Cincinnati started winning. He did not ease his way in. He did not play scared. He came back and attacked. Now, let's talk about Cleveland, because the Browns in 2025 were one of the most fascinating and chaotic quarterback situations in the entire NFL. The Browns let veteran Jameis Winston walk in free agency, then brought in Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett, while also drafting Oregon QB Dillon Gabriel and Colorado QB Shedeur Sanders in the 2025 NFL Draft. Incumbent Deshaun Watson remained on the roster, still working his way back from injury. 4 quarterbacks, multiple careers, one roster, one impossible situation. And hovering over all of it, one of the most extraordinary defensive players this sport has ever produced. Myles Garrett, the man, the monster, the edge rusher who had been terrorizing AFC North quarterbacks for nearly a decade. Garrett signed a massive 4-year, $160 million contract to stay with the Browns in the 2025 offseason, Bleacher Report. And from day one of training camp, everyone who watched him could see something was different. His defensive coordinator, Jim Schwartz, had issued a challenge in the offseason. He had called him his Spider-Man and publicly demanded more. And Garrett, who had already earned a place among the all-time greats, decided to reach for something bigger. Schwartz said during the season, "It's the best training camp I've seen from Myles. He's been very driven. He's been trying to carry the load. He's not afraid of the spotlight. He's been out in that. He's been a good leader for us." Cleveland Browns. This season had a mission, and that mission had a name written on it: Joe Burrow. The Bengals and Browns kicked off their 2025 rivalry with a Week 1 meeting in Cleveland. The Bengals pulled out a tight 17-16 victory in that season opener, Cincinnati Bengals. But that game was more than just a result. It was a statement. It was a warning. The Bengals arrived in hostile territory, inside a stadium full of Browns fans screaming for blood, and Joe Burrow, playing in his first regular season game after months of rehabilitation, walked out with a win. Barely, by a single point. The kind of victory that feels like it costs you something. And on the other side, Garrett was there, making plays, causing problems. Burrow was the 11th quarterback on Garrett's 2025 sack ledger, having also been sacked twice in the team's first meeting in Week 1, NFL. Even in a loss, even in a game that the Browns could not finish, Garrett was hunting. He went after Burrow twice in that opener and brought him down both times. It was a preview of what was to come. As the 2025 season rolled forward, the Browns' quarterback carousel became one of the most watched subplots in the entire NFL. The Browns started 3 different players under center throughout the season, including rookies Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur, Cincinnati Bengals. For fans, for coaches, for the locker room, it was exhausting. Head coach Kevin Stefanski was trying to build something. He was trying to evaluate talent, develop young players, and compete in one of the nastiest divisions in football, all at the same time.
Meanwhile, on the defensive side of the ball, Garrett was putting together a season for the history books. Garrett had 3 games with at least 3 sacks, with his best performance coming against the Patriots in Week 8, when he recorded a career-high 5 sacks, Cleveland Browns. 5 sacks in a single game against a professional NFL offense. That is not a football statistic. That is a horror movie for offensive linemen. And then 2 weeks later, 4 more sacks against the Baltimore Ravens. The record that had stood since 2001, Michael Strahan's 22.5 sacks, suddenly felt reachable. But let's not forget about Cincinnati, because while Garrett was making history, Burrow was quietly rebuilding something. Burrow completed 144 of 220 passing attempts for 1,573 passing yards and 14 touchdowns in 7 games played after his return, including back-to-back 300-yard passing games in Weeks 16 and 17, Cleveland Browns. The weapons around him, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, tight end Noah Fant, were all healthy and hungry. Cincinnati was not done fighting, even in a lost season. And then came Week 18, January 4th, 2026, the final game of the regular season, Cleveland Browns versus Cincinnati Bengals at Paycor Stadium in Cincinnati. The stage was set for something extraordinary, and both sides knew it. The night before the game, Myles Garrett could not sleep. Garrett had a dream that he fell short of the league's single-season sack record. He woke up and made sure that nightmare would not become reality. ESPN. He had breakfast that morning with his physical therapist. He was calm and focused. He had been here before, the edge of history, and he was not going to let anything stand in his way. For the Bengals, Zach Taylor's defense was ranked 2nd in the league in fewest passing yards allowed, and Cleveland held Chase to 2 receptions for 26 yards and Higgins to 3 receptions for 33 yards in the Week 1 meeting, Cincinnati Bengals. The Browns had a game plan: stop the weapons, force Burrow to check down, slow the machine. And the Bengals had their own counter. They had watched Garrett all season. They knew he was 1 sack away from history. Throughout the game, the Bengals threw every possible defensive scheme at Garrett: double teams, chip blocks, extra protection, and he later said he did not see more than 3 single coverage pass rushes in the entire game. ESPN. They were willing to sacrifice their offensive design to prevent one man from making history on their field. It nearly worked. The game was brutal. It was tight. Cleveland Browns quarterback Shedeur Sanders, the rookie from Colorado, was on the field, and the Browns were clawing for every inch. Cleveland Browns on defense, Shedeur Sanders faced a Bengals pass rush that was active and relentless. Bengals defensive end Cam Sample forced a fumble off a sack of Sanders in the first half, which Cincinnati recovered. Cincinnati Bengals. The game had chaos written all over it. Turnovers, big plays, a crowd that knew something historic was either going to happen or be denied. Garrett kept hunting every single snap. He lined up at different positions, edge, tackle, off-ball linebacker, doing whatever it took to get past the protection. His teammates looked for ways to free him up, working to shed chip blocks and clear double teams so he could reach Burrow. Cleveland Browns. The entire defense was playing for their teammate. That is what a real locker room looks like. And then, with roughly 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, it happened. Garrett used the fastest get-off of his season, 0.23 seconds off the snap, and a textbook swim move to get past left tackle Orlando Brown Jr. and bring down Joe Burrow, his 23rd sack of the season, a new NFL record. ESPN. The crowd inside Paycor Stadium, Cincinnati's own building, erupted, not for the Bengals, for the moment, for what they had all just witnessed. In the stands, Garrett's parents, Audrey and Lawrence, shared an emotional embrace. On the field, teammates swarmed him, with tight end David Njoku placing an imaginary crown on his head before the defensive line hoisted him onto their shoulders, BET. Orlando Brown Jr., who had faced Garrett as a member of the Bengals and the Ravens over the years, spoke after the game with nothing but respect. "That's the best defensive end of our generation," Brown said. "I got a ton of respect for him and his game and his approach." ESPN.
And Garrett himself, walking up to the podium after the game, reached for something poetic. He quoted lyrics from a Kanye West song playing from his phone at the lectern, saying simply, "Find your dreams come true. Been waiting on this my whole life, my whole football career." But the game was not over. The Bengals were not done. Joe Burrow, even after being sacked for the record, picked himself up and drove his offense back down the field. Cincinnati had the lead heading into the final minutes. Kicker Andre Szmyt drilled a walk-off 49-yard field goal to win the game for Cleveland, 20-18, overriding Cincinnati's chances and sending the Browns off the field as winners in the final regular season game of 2025. 2 touchdowns from Jamar Chase and T. Higgins had not been enough. Burrow, after the loss, said publicly, "I'm really proud of what I did this year. I came back from an injury faster than any human ever has. I'm really proud of that. I played some really good football when I came back. I had one bad game, and you certainly don't want those, but I won't lose my mind over that." That is the Bengals quarterback. That is what this rivalry does to the men inside it. It tests you. It exposes your limits. And sometimes, even when you've played good football, even when you've given everything, the other side still finds a way. For Cleveland, the season ended with a historic individual performance and a win, but no playoffs. Kevin Stefanski was fired the morning after the season concluded, ending a 6-year run as head coach that included 2 playoff appearances and 2 Coach of the Year awards. The front office looked at that 5-12 record and made a decision. The rebuild was entering a new phase. Garrett had made history. The rookies had shown promise, but the organization decided that a new voice was needed to take the next step. And now, heading into 2026, both franchises carry different kinds of momentum. The Bengals are entering 2026 with some of the highest expectations the organization has ever had, looking to return to the top of the AFC standings. Burrow is healthy. Chase and Higgins are both locked in. The offensive weapons are elite. The question, as it has been for years, is whether the defense and the offensive line can hold up when the pressure peaks. Cleveland, meanwhile, is rebuilding around a new head coach, a promising draft class featuring linebacker Carson Schwezinger, running back Quinshawn Judkins, and tight end Harold Fannin Jr., and the continued development of rookie quarterback Shedeur Sanders. And standing over all of it, still the most dominant defensive player on the planet is Myles Garrett, the sack king, the record holder, the man who hunts quarterbacks for a living and refuses to accept that anything is impossible. Garrett himself, even after breaking the record, spoke about what comes next. "I want to be remembered as one of the very best at the position, and that includes being well-rounded," he said. "I know the record for tackles for loss is 39, and I feel like I can go and challenge that." Let that sink in. He just broke one of the most untouchable records in NFL history, a record that had stood for over 2 decades since Michael Strahan set it in 2001. And the first thing Myles Garrett is thinking about is the next record. That is who he is. That is what this rivalry brings out. That is what the AFC North does to great players. It makes them want more. The Bengals and the Browns will meet again in 2026. They will meet in Cleveland and they will meet in Cincinnati. And both times the stakes will be different, but the tension will be exactly the same. Because this rivalry is not about records or stats or contracts. It is about the road between two Ohio cities and the pride of the men who play for them. Every snap matters. Every sack matters. Every fourth-quarter drive means something that the regular season cannot fully contain. Joe Burrow knows what it feels like to get up off the turf and look into the eyes of Myles Garrett. Garrett knows what it feels like to chase a man who refuses to stop moving forward. These two players have been defined, in part, by what they've done to each other, and the 2025 season was the loudest chapter of that story yet. The AFC North is never quiet. It is never clean. It is a division built on violence, on history, on pride, and on the kind of football that makes grown men nervous in the fourth quarter. And right now, sitting at the center of all of it, with a new record, a new coaching staff, and a new chapter being written, the Cleveland Browns and the Cincinnati Bengals are headed toward each other once again. Don't look away. The Battle of Ohio never truly ends. It just resets, and every single season it finds a new way to remind the rest of the NFL that some rivalries are not just about wins and losses. They are about identity, about survival, about who you are when everything is on the line and the clock is running out. Myles Garrett chased history and caught it on Joe Burrow's back in Cincinnati's own building with 5 minutes left on the clock. And that is the kind of moment that defines what the AFC North is all about.